By the way, guys, by completely one-sided, I don't mean like it's a low diff. It's obviously extreme diff, but with a clear winner. So yeah, enjoy the video. Listen, I do not like saying Mihawk is stronger than Shanks. I don't. I've been a Shanks guy for the majority of my time reading One Piece, and I believed Shanks to be stronger because simply for the fact that I did not like to say Mihawk was stronger because he looked like a fraud in comparison to Shanks. Shanks gets the better moments, he gets the more hype around him, he gets the better statements, and he looks like the stronger person in comparison to Mihawk, who looks a little sus as well. If he didn't have that title going for him, like, is this guy even stronger than Katakuri is the question. Asking. The man gets introduced in the story. He's chasing down Don Krieg in the East Blue. Like, Don Krieg? Really? You dodge Shanks at Marineford? It's like, bro, what? But you're chasing down Don Krieg. Like, bro, what are you doing? And he'd rather fight an old, dying, sick Whitebeard? It's like, bro, like, what's going on? But then Visto runs into you and you guys have a good clash and you say, let's postpone this fight and we'll continue it later. And then you never spin the block again? It's like, what? But also he does have a pretty high bounty, so that saves him as well. The title and the bounty save him. But unfortunately, I have converted to the Mihawk being stronger than Shanks simply for the fact that you really cannot argue it in this day and age, right? Until Shanks busts out a Glock 19 or he starts fighting like Sanji, you really cannot say Shanks is over Mihawk because in the end it would just make Zoro fraudulent from what we know. And if you're wondering why it would make Zoro fraudulent, we're gonna talk about it. So the three main reasons as to why people believe Shanks is stronger than Mihawk. The first one being Shanks is not a swordsman. That one's pretty funny. 2, Mihawk has better swordsmanship than Shanks, and Shanks has better overall haki and he's a better fighter, while Mihawk just has the better swordsman skill, or in other words swordsmanship, because that's really what that means. And lastly, I don't take titles as concrete because other people in the series title is not a fact, so Mihawk's doesn't have to be a fact as well. Let me give my opinion on all those 3 arguments and tell you why none of them are valid at all. So the first one, Shanks not being a swordsman. I think this shouldn't be a conversation in 2023. I think people have matured to the point where you now realize Shanks is a swordsman. And every iteration we've seen him in the manga, the man has pulled out a sword. When he pulled up against Shiki, or when Shiki pulled up on them, the man held his sword. He brought out his sword. When he went to go fight Whitebeard to talk about Ace, and they mentioned his legendary duels with Mihawk, he was using a sword. Obviously, when he fought Whitebeard and clashed with them, what did he do? He clashed with his sword. Man pulled up to Marineford. He stopped the Kainu, one of the admirals, with his sword to scare Greenbow from going to Wano. Even though he used haki, which he's referred to as the Haki King, he was holding on to his sword in order to flex his haki. So I'm recording this while spoilers came out, and apparently Kid got hit with a Kamusari attack from Shanks' sword slash that KO'd him. So if that's true, it's going to be on the screen right now. And yes, once again, he is using his sword to KO Kid. What more proof do you need that he's a swordsman? We literally got in the latest chapter. So Shanks not being a swordsman really doesn't make sense at all. For you to prove that, you would have to be reading another story. Now let's go into the second argument, which is by far the main reason why people like to push Shanks above Mihawk, is that Mihawk's the better swordsman, but Shanks is overall stronger, mainly because of his hakis, which makes him the better fighter. Now I just wanted to ask you guys something real quick. When Oda mentions that Mihawk is a better swordsman or he's more skilled than Shanks, I'm assuming what you guys think Oda means by that is how well he throws around his sword and how well he flicks his wrist. Like these guys right here, you see these guys fencing, going back and forth, or these guys jousting. What you guys are imagining swordsmanship to be is literally this right here. There's no other confirmed fighting style in One Piece that's called swordsmanship. What you guys are assuming to be swordsmanship is literally how well you flick your wrist, or a swordsman's skill is how well you flick your wrist, and that's what separates people like Mihawk from people like Shanks. Not only is that headcanon and you can't really prove that, I can prove that that definitely isn't the case with our favorite green-haired Roronoa Zoro. Now Zoro should be the embodiment of what a swordsman is, since he's gonna be the pinnacle of a swordsman and the greatest swordsman swordsman to ever exist in One Piece. So Zoro's journey to becoming the world's strongest or world's greatest swordsman, he should be showing us what it takes to be a true swordsman. And up until this point, what have we been seeing from Zoro? Have we ever seen Zoro go around defeating enemies because he's able to use his swordsmanship skill, which you guys define to be how well you throw your sword around? Or does Zoro overcome his enemies by his sheer overwhelming power? Does he overcome his enemies by having better technique, or does he overcome his enemies because his haki is strong as hell? For example, in the most latest arc I can give you guys, he powered up and got one of the best abilities in the entire series, Advanced Conqueror's Haki, and that made him defeat King. Previously in the arc, he got a new sword. The whole use of the sword was to develop his haki. Zoro, who's the embodiment of a true swordsman, is heavily focusing on his power and his haki. There was never a moment in One Piece where Zoro emphasized his sword technique or his swordsmanship skill as a priority to him. Zoro's priorities is always just to get stronger, and we've seen how he's been getting stronger and how he defeats his enemies, mainly because of his power and his haki. Now Zoro, who's an embodiment of what you guys would call a true swordsman, has the best haki ability in the entire series we know this far. Now would you look at Zoro and Shanks and be like, these guys are two completely different fighters? You wouldn't do that, right? Zoro is pretty much the same fighter as Shanks, but he just fights with 3 swords. To become the world's strongest swordsman, it required Zoro to train his haki to the level where to become one of the handful of the strongest people. If you guys wanted me to give you a representation of what you guys are basically implying, it's this screenshot right here, which I find very funny. Zoro, who's using the exact same abilities as Shanks, by your guys' logic would be classified as like swordsman skill, what he's doing, while Shanks, what he does, it's swordsmanship strength or power, and he's like a haki man. If he's a haki man, the guy on the right should be a haki man too. That's all I'm saying. Now let's go back to Mihawk versus Shanks. What could Mihawk possibly do to the point where he fights any different than Roanoa Zoro? If that's what it takes to become the world's strongest swordsman, that level of power that Zoro has, why wouldn't Mihawk have the same similar type of fighting style? There's this weird notion that haki power isn't the main focus of swordsmanship, which we literally just seen is exactly the main focus of swordsmanship with Roanoa Zoro. If Roanoa Zoro's main focus is to get stronger via haki to make himself more powerful, why wouldn't Mihawk's swordsmanship be classified as that too, since he's the guy that holds the title that Zoro wants? Why is there this imaginary fighting style that Mihawk now uses where he's a predominantly a fencer and is mediocre in haki? The term swordsmanship and skill, or whatever you want to call it, is literally referring to their overall strength with the sword. So in other words, Mihawk should be the same exact fighter as Shanks. So let's cut the bullshit with but Shanks has stronger haki though. Like, to be the strongest swordsman like we just talked about, you have to have some of the strongest haki in the entire series. And if you don't think Mihawk has Conqueror's haki, I mean, you can think that, but honestly, like, you're just being disingenuous. Like, we all know he does. Like, look at the statement right here from Rayleigh. Most people who made a name for themselves possess this ability. Mihawk sits at the top as the world's strongest swordsman. Zoro at his current strength, we can all agree, isn't as strong as Mihawk, and he's still trying to get to his level. You're telling me when Zoro goes to fight Mihawk at the end of the series, he's gonna have Conqueror Lightning oozing off him while Mihawk's fighting with a plain sword that's infused with just Artemu haki? Yeah, okay. There's 2 more things I want to talk about. The third one being, titles don't actually mean anything, because Whitebeard wasn't actually the world's strongest man. Kaido was said to be the strongest Lancian heir, but you think Shanks is stronger than him. Whitebeard wasn't actually the strongest. Whatever. Even though there's context to those titles, which I could argue that they do still make sense, those titles I do agree with could be a bit iffy in some aspects. I agree with, but you cannot apply that logic with Zoro's title. Since I just explained to you guys right now that Shanks is a swordsman and that's definitive, to say Mihawk's title doesn't apply to Shanks would be implying that Mihawk is not the world's strongest swordsman. To say that Shanks is stronger than Mihawk would imply that Shanks is a stronger swordsman than Mihawk. The only way you guys can really say that Shanks is stronger than Mihawk is if you would say Shanks is not a swordsman, which doesn't make sense at all. We know for a fact that this title cannot be fraudulent. It literally directly connects to one of our main characters who's been chasing this dream for the entirety of the series. For him to finally reach his dream of being the world's strongest swordsman, to not actually have defeated the world's strongest swordsman, would that actually make sense to you guys? Would Oda write that? Oda would go down as one of the worst authors for having Zoro defeat a guy who's not even stronger than the rest of the swordsmen in the verse, besides Zoro, who obviously defeats him. Yeah, no, this title is not up for debate. But there's no way on earth there's a living, breathing swordsman that is stronger than Mihawk, who holds the title as the world's strongest swordsman, because in that case it would make Mihawk not actually the world's strongest swordsman, which will make Zoro, who defeats Mihawk at the end of the series, questionably not the world's strongest swordsman as well, which in terms makes Zoro a fraud. Now lastly, since the latest chapter came out, people are gonna be like, Mihawk has no feats, Shanks has no feats, which you're right. Like I said, Shanks has all the feats to look stronger than Mihawk right now. But the feats don't contradict Mihawk's title. Yes, they do look impressive. They look more impressive than what we ever seen for Mihawk. It's not like Mihawk has went full power. Yes, if Mihawk has went full power and the feats that Shanks is showcasing to us look stronger than Mihawk at full strength, then I would definitely 100% agree with you guys that Shanks overwrites this title and is stronger than Mihawk. Let me give you guys an analogy. Mihawk, his strongest attack gets stopped by a character like Sanji, for example. And Shanks comes along and he low dips Sanji with a weaker attack. Obviously, I'm gonna say Shanks is stronger because he was able to kill Sanji while Sanji was able to tank a full power Mihawk. At that point, the feats showed that Shanks is stronger than Mihawk. You guys are using the feats as definitive concrete proof to prove he's over Mihawk and to overwrite his title when Mihawk hasn't even shown his full strength yet. You can only use the feats to contradict Mihawk's feats. Mihawk doesn't have any feats. He has his title. And until Shanks' feats prove to be stronger than a full power Mihawk, we can't use it to overwrite the title. It just doesn't make sense. But yeah, that's all I want to say, guys. Make sure you guys take the time to leave your thoughts down below. This was a pretty fun video to make. I absolutely loved it. I want to know your guys' thoughts. And yeah, let's see what goes on in the comment section. Peace.